Now, let's get into some other tissues. We got skeletal muscle. Make sure you're saying the word muscle for these. Don't say skeletal tissue. I might think you're thinking of bone. They're long shafts or tubes, right? They're called muscle fibers or skeletal muscle fibers. A skeletal muscle fiber is a skeletal muscle cell. You can see these wavy lines. Those are the striations. We look for striations with skeletal muscle. And multiple nuclei per cell. Sometimes it's hard to tell which one they're on, but there's definitely multiples. If you look at all those, there's more than one per muscle cell. Okay? So long straight fibers, multiple nuclei, and striations. I see the same thing here, and multiple nuclei, striations, and long thin tube-shaped cells or cylinders. Cardiac muscle is branched. So a difference here is you can see branching of the muscle fibers. They're not long straight tubes. Also, they're uninucleate, but that's hard to tell sometimes from the slide. They have these little dark bands. See those dark bands? Those are called intercalated discs. That helps you identify what it is. Also, that you're in cardiac muscle. And it is striated. If you look close, you can see striations. Same thing here. If we look close, we can see some of the striations kind of vertical and the dark bands of the intercalated discs. And it is branched, so we're in cardiac muscle. Smooth muscle, this is a cross-section. We're going to pay attention to this side, though, the longitudinal section. And we're going to look at to me it looks like a plank of wood, right, with knots in it. And so if you see that, there's no striations here. It is uninucleate, hard to tell, though. Again, so if you look at this presentation, it's smooth muscle. If you go here, same thing, except it's laying on its side, plank of wood, right? Actually looks like just a plank with knots in it. That's smooth muscle. And this is a neuron. Well, actually, we're going to say this. If I say what's a tissue, you're going to say it's nervous tissue, right? Because different cells in here. This big purple guy in the middle, this is the giant multipolar neuron. You could just say neuron. And then these little guys here, all these little guys are helper cells. They're called neuroglia. And so two different types of, or two categories. This is a category of cell, neuroglia. This is a neuron, and then the tissue would be nervous tissue. Depending on what's asked, pay attention to that as well. Okay, we're in compact bone. Compact bone, you can say one of two things. You can say compact bone, you can say osseous tissue. Do not just say bone. Make sure it's compact bone or osseous tissue. What you're going to see, in fact, let's look at this one first. We'll get back to that. What you're going to see are these, almost looks like a bunch of tree stumps that we cross-sected, okay? And so each tree stump, if we look here, each one is going to be called an osteon. You see how I bracketed it a little bit there in red? That's an osteon, the whole tree stump. If we look at the little black dashes, those are called lacunae. Lacunae is actually plural, lacuna is singular. It doesn't really matter too much for testing, but each of those is a lacuna, and it's going to make up these kind of concentric rings. And each of the rings, so between the lacuna, right, so like if you look here, how I bracketed that, it's called a lamella. And that's not just this portion, it's this whole ring that goes around. Okay? It's the ring of bone. So the rings of bone that make up the osteon of the lamella, and the lamella are made up of these lacunae. Okay? Another name for osteon is the vergent system. You can use that as well. If you go to the center, you have what's called the central canal, which is also called a vergent canal. Let's go back to that other slide. This way. And so same type of structures here. We've got the osteon as the entire tree stump. If we go to the center, you got the central canal. Connecting central canal of one osteon to another is another canal called the perforating canal, also called the Volkmann's canal. Okay, so if we go to this slide, you can see the lacunae better, which are the cavities, and inside there is going to be a cell called an osteocyte if we're in bone, right? So in bone, inside the lacunae are osteocytes. Pay attention if it's asking for what cell is there or if it's talking about the structure or the cavity. Coming off of the lacunae, you have these little crack-like structures here, these little canals called canaliculi, central canal in the center again, and that covers, the compact bone. So we go here, now we're in cartilage. If it is a cartilage slide, you have to say cartilage, okay? And so if you look on this one, it's hyaline cartilage. It looks like smooth glass or an ice skating, ice. So there's an ice skating rink, and I always say that these little guys here are the ice skaters. And those are actually called chondrocytes, each of those. And if you look, this is the cavity that they're in. So there's 3 chondrocytes in that cavity. The cavity is a lacunae. But now we're in cartilage, so the cells are not osteocytes, they're called chondrocytes. If you look here, that's another lacunae, or lacuna, and inside we have the 2 chondrocytes in there. Okay? So this is hyaline cartilage. That's how it appears, nice and smooth. And then if you look here, fibrocartilage has two appearances. This is one of them. If you look at this, you can see, to me it looks like little fishies swimming, right? So these are the eyes of the fish. And this is called fibrocartilage. Again, because we're in cartilage, I know what the cells are without even looking. It's going to be chondrocytes, because chondrocytes are the cells that are in lacunae, the cavities inside of the cartilage. The primary fiber type you're going to see in fibrocartilage is going to be collagen, very dense, strong, tensile strength for this tissue to resist stresses and compression, things like that. Another way we see fibrocartilage, I look at this, I see an ocean, I'm in a helicopter, I'm looking down, I see these little people in the ocean, right, because there was a shipwreck, and so that's what I visualize when I see this. This is another way you'll see fibrocartilage appear. Again, those are chondrocytes inside the lacunae, even though we can't see the lacunae very well, and collagen is the primary fiber type. Elastic cartilage, we've got a bunch of chondrocytes, and surrounding them, in between them, we have a little bit of black, almost like someone took black charcoal and kind of colored in certain spots. That is actually the elastic fibers that you find in elastic cartilage. And again, once again, chondrocytes, because we're still in cartilage. Now we have to be careful with elastic cartilage because we do have elastic type of connective tissue. Let's go there first. Elastic connective tissue, this is not elastic cartilage. These are the elastic fibers, these lasagna noodles here, right? These are the elastic fibers, and we are in elastic connective tissue. You have to make sure you specify, right, elastic CT versus elastic cartilage. If we're on an exam, let's go back there. Now, if we look at areolar CT, this is a connective tissue proper. If we're in connective tissue proper, the cells are going to be fibroblasts unless we're in adipose tissue. And then what you're seeing, though, on most of these is going to be the nucleus of the fibroblast. So that's why it says fibroblast nucleus. And when we look at the different types of fibers that we find in areolar CT or connective tissue, we have these thick purple fibers. Those are going to be collagen fibers, and the thin black fibers, those are going to be elastic fibers. Okay, so that's areolar connective tissue. We can see some cells in here as well. Well, this is reticular connective tissue. It's also a connective tissue proper, so these cells are actually going to be fibroblasts as well, or fibroblast nuclei. And then the fibers are going to be reticular fibers. The way I recognize this, it looks like trees with leaves falling off, right? So it's autumn and the leaves are falling off the trees, and that's going to be reticular connective tissue. If you know you're in reticular connective tissue, it tells you what fiber type it's going to be. This is another example. Now it's the end of fall, all the leaves have fallen off, right? And so these branches here, those are the reticular fibers of reticular connective tissue. This is adipose tissue. Now if you look, and we differentiate this from like simple squamous, right? These look like, to me these look like fish eggs or something along those lines, and the nuclei are not anywhere in the center, right? So if you look at that simple squamous looking for that SI view, we don't see the nuclei in the center on this one where we do in simple squamous. See that on the sides there? And also there's some spacing in there, you can see, which we did not see with simple squamous. Now this has got its own special thing. Now, adipose is connective tissue, so you're going to say adipose CT or adipose connective tissue. And the cells are called adipocytes. Okay? We're going to make sure we say adipocytes. They're not fibroblasts in this one, and they're not fat cells. We're going to say adipocytes specifically. Same thing, this is a close-up view. Each of these cells is an adipocyte, and this is adipose connective tissue. Again, much more zoom.